It's a beautiful bacon day, Cookie Crusaders. Today I'm coming to you guys to talk about toppings and a pretty detailed video about toppings and what to kind of expect for each cookie. This will be divided into multiple videos as there's a lot to talk about, but I'm going to try and give as in-depth understanding of these toppings as I can, so that way you can understand how to best utilize them for each person's skill. So we're going to start with pure vanilla, the first ancient that was released, and what my thoughts are on the different toppings that you can run on pure vanilla and how to best assess the skill that pure vanilla has. So let's cover the skill first. This skill is a 19-second skill that gives 189.4% of the user's attack, which would be pure vanilla, of healing, and a shield that absorbs 20% of the max HP for 3 seconds. Now, what that means is that the max HP of that cookie that is given a shield, not pure vanilla, but the other cookies, that shield will be 20% of whatever their max HP is. So for an example, if the max HP of the cookie is 212,000%, then 20% of that is going to be about 42,000. So a 42,000 shield before taking any damage. Now that's pretty good. So ways to specifically abuse that skill is to give those other cookies on your team higher HP. If you're giving them damage resistance, the shield's not going to do anything more. It's just going to be that same shield on that same HP. If you're giving them more defense, it's going to be that same shield. It doesn't change. So ways you can affect that is by peanut toppings or having a substat of HP on whatever topping you're running on them. So that's something you can keep in mind and consider for that. Another way is through some of the treasures, such as the flamingo tube, seeing as that gives a maximum HP of 47% to the 2 cookies with the highest max HP. So Hollyberry, in instance, would get a 47.7% buff at level 11 Flamingo Tube on top of the existing HP, which would only increase the shield from pure vanilla even further. And so that is an important thing to consider when running the toppings in coordination using pure vanilla skill. So if you run pure vanilla skill to do a shield of 20% and it's super low HP cookies, but they have great attack, they have great speed, but they have low health, you'll still get a benefit from it. It's not that it's not a benefit. It's just that it is a smaller shield, so therefore enemies and cookies that can deal quick and fast and powerful damage will break that shield quickly, and then their second attack will hit right through. And why that's important is, imagine this. Imagine you have a 40,000 HP cookie, and they get 20% shield. Well, that's an 8,000 shield. If you have a cookie that their regular non-skill based attack deals more than 8,000 damage, their regular attack is going to destroy that shield on that cookie, and then their skill is just going to light off as if there was no shield on you at all. So it works best with higher health cookies, as their shields will be much bigger. Now, of course, Twizzly, Affogato, and Dark Cacao have the ability to just nullify shields completely, regardless of how small or how big the HP shield is. So keep that in mind. Now, on the other side of the skill, maybe you don't want to build an HB team. Maybe you want a more DPS related team. So something different you can do is raise pure vanilla's attack. So pure vanilla's attack, 184% of the attack. Right now at a base level, pure vanilla, at least at level 64 star, with all the bonds and research lab upgrades that I have done, has a base attack of 20,674. So 180% of that. If I equip anything else that has attack stats, those will be raised. If not, it won't make a difference. So, there are two ways to think about this. You can have the attack completely stacked and have it as high as possible, whether you use serine raspberries or if you would equip any other toppings and you just have a high substat attack. Or you can run a cooldown and attack speed for faster activations, so that way, even though it's not raising the level of power, you're raising the amount of times it happens. And so that is why a lot of people run either solid almond or chocolates on pure vanilla, because solid almond has the chances to keep pure vanilla alive longer. Chocolate has the ability to run the skill more often. And so those are all important things. What I personally think are the two best toppings for pure vanilla, and the substats matter very big on this. First is chocolate, but the three substats I think are best, at least depending on your team build. I say that as a big disclaimer. If your team is strong enough to last without pure vanilla in the late game, so if it's PvP and it's quick battles, or if it's something that's going to be a quick wave, then this build, which would be cooldown at the highest percent of 25% with chocolate toppings, attack speed of 15%, because that's as high as you can get when you have chocolate toppings on, and attack percent, those three things are going to make you have the highest healing and the fastest activations possible for pure vanilla. If you need pure vanilla to survive, then I would still keep attack speed and cooldown and just put the rest into damage resist, which you can get up to 30% damage resist on chocolate toppings. And so the big reasons for cooldown: it affects your initial use of the skill when the cookie first enters battle, and it affects how often you can recast the skill afterwards. So both of those matter. Attack speed is a confirmed animation speed up. That is both for skills and for actual attacks. And so the faster your animation plays, the sooner you're allowed to requeue your cooldown for your skill. So in tandem with cooldown, it's going to make lightning fast ability strike offs, because you'll be waiting 1 to maybe 2 seconds less each time, and every second matters when you need those quick battles in player versus player or other modes. The damage resistance is really going to be the best option in this point to have a chance to live. You could technically substitute the damage resistance for high HP, but a 15% HP is not nearly enough compared to 30% damage resist that you can do as a substat on chocolate toppings. If you were running peanut toppings, it would be a little bit of a different story, but then you'd be going for a completely different build. You would be rather making a build of pure vanilla trying to survive as absolutely long as possible, regardless of how many times the skill fires off and how well pure vanilla keeps the other cookies on your team alive. So for the sake of keeping 4 alive rather than keeping pure vanilla alive, I think it's better to build attack speed and cooldown as the main two, and then go between either damage resist and attack depending on your team build, or if you really want to kind of get the best of both worlds, maybe you can do a little bit of attack and damage resistance, as you would be able to still pull off about 20% damage resistance while still having about 8% attack, which is not bad overall. And so that's my recommendation for pure vanilla. I'm trying to build better chocolate toppings, but I have for the longest time been running almond toppings with mostly damage resist, and it's not even amazing damage resist, because the highest you can do on solid almonds would be about 51% damage resist. But overall, I have some attack speed, I have some cooldown on there, so it's not necessarily terrible. Now, one thing you can do too And this is a very wonky kind of build because it hasn't really been tested to tell if it's going to be amazing or not, but it is something that could be done. Since Pure Vanilla gives a shield to your teammate cookies, that is considered a buff. And seeing it is a buff, you can run Amplify buff on them. Now the thing is, Amplify buff is a percent of a percent. So what that means is, if they get a 20% shield of their HP, and then the Amplify buff is maxed out, which would be, let's see, 3% times 5, that's 15, plus the max of Amp 2, that's 25%. So 25% of 20%, I believe, is only 5.5%. So that means that they would get a full-on shield of 25.5% of their max HP for 3 seconds. Well, it would actually be longer than 3 seconds. The Amplify buff would extend the time too, but the time would only be about 1.5 seconds more, if that. So it's a weird thing you could play with, but it is something you could do. I don't currently recommend it because I haven't had the ability to fully test its capabilities. But it is something I'll be getting to in the near future once I have more Amplify buff toppings and can test it out. Next, I'm going to actually move to Sorbet. What I'm going to kind of do is go a downward arrow. So Sorbet, then Affogato, then Cotton. And the reason I'll be doing that is so that it's not just all the legendaries and ancients right to start. Yes, I know they're important, but it's good to have a full spectrum of the cookies rather than just the top 5 most talked about and most used because they're in the higher categories. I still want others to be looked at as well. So I'm going to go to Sorbet. And I think we'll do Sorbet and Affogato today. And then the next episode we'll start with Cotton. So that way it's not terribly long segments. Actually, no. We're already at 12 minutes. I think we're just going to stop at Sorbet today. So we'll break it up to 2 cookies per episode. Alright, so Sorbet, his skill is a very special skill. He does what's called true damage. True damage can bypass enemies' max HP and their defense. So, if we read his skill, it ambushes the frontmost enemies, so it's always the front, dealing area damage, and that deals additional damage to 2 enemies with the highest max HP. For enemies that are cookies, the additional attack will be dealt as true damage relative to the enemy's max HP and cannot exceed 300,000. For other enemies, the additional damage will be regular damage. So what that means is, if the true damage hits, it will scale according to their max HP, but the damage will not exceed 300,000. So if you have a really high HP cookie, let's say they have 500,000 health, Sorbet will guaranteed chip off 3/5 of their health if hitting at the maximum level. But because of that cap, the higher the HPs go of cookies in the game, the longer that the game is out, the less Sorbet will be able to do in the long run, because those cookies will just be able to outlive his attacks. He's a tank shredder right now because the tanks can only get so high, and because the true damage bypasses defense, it doesn't matter what damage resistance, defense, and HP they have, as it scales accordingly. And so what's important here is that if you're running something that helps Sorbet do a lot of damage, that's going to be the most helpful. Same thing with non-cookies, dealing 662% damage of regular. So you times his base attack basically by 6.5 times, which is quite a lot of damage. And it's quick too. And so that's why he is a very high damage dealer. Now, something I'm still yet to test is if critical toppings will work with him. And I say that because, as far as I currently understand, critical toppings will not work with poison, and I'm not sure if it works with area of effect attacks. Because there are certain things, at least poison for sure, that just have no effect from critical stats and critical hits whatsoever. And so, if critical damage affects his skill better than regular attacks can, if that actually can affect it, my lean will actually be towards critical jellies, because with the new monument and the lab upgrades we can do, we can get a 40% attack buff maximum percentage on critical attack, and that's already outweighing the regular attack percentages that you can get from doing searing. Now, what's important though is that if you have critical jellies on Sorbet, they're only going to work if you can increase the critical chances of your entire team. So if you're running critical apple jellies on Sorbet and you've only got a 17% critical chance, like I do with this current searing build because of the lab upgrades I have, then that's like a almost 1 in 10 chance that you'll hit a critical strike. And so for that reason, that's not so great to run. That would be better to run searing at that point, because searing toppings will have the guaranteed attack buff, where the critical, you have a guaranteed stronger hit, but you need to hit the critical. So to give a good example, with Twizzly, real quick, 49% critical buff on that, and those aren't upgraded. I think on Cream Puff, 70%. So 70% chance for a critical with Cream Puff there. And so the higher your crit, and the Scythe gives you 29%, so with that build on Cream Puff, nearly 100%. So if that was on Sorbet, high chances, almost near guaranteeing a critical strike hits. It will do more damage than the attack searing. I've at least tested that, and I can confirm that it has a higher damage output as long as you're hitting the criticals. If you do not have the team built to do critical damage, don't go that route. Instead, go with the searing toppings, because with the searing, you're going to have way more damage, and you need as high as percent to stack as possible. You could run some cooldowns to get the ability to fire off more often. This will give Sorbet a little bit better protection, since it's damage avoidance doing his skill. But in the end, whatever you sacrifice for attack power, you have to find a way to give him survivability. So if you're giving up attack power, it better be for really good cooldown or really good damage resistance. Sorbet is also one of the cookies that I actually don't recommend attack speed on unless it's a full searing build, because the attack speed of his animation being sped up means that he has less time to avoid the attacks and skills of other cookies. So if you have attack speed on him, he will perform his attacks faster, yes, but he'll also be more vulnerable to skills more often. And so I don't recommend that attack speed being increased unless you're going for just a full DPS, no worry about survival type of build. Then go attack speed cooldown, and just light the stage on fire with this damage. So that's all I'm going to cover today. The next video, we are going to go into Avocado Cookie and Cotton. We'll cover those two, and what my thoughts and recommendations are for them based on their skills and how they can perform in different team combos. If you have anything that you want to add in the comments, you have any opinions or specific cookies you want covered, because you think that they're underrated, or that you have certain things you want to have, then please let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for stopping by.